Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and I've got a kind of review to do for you. This is one of the knives that I'm borrowing from my buddy YD Knives. I'll link to his Instagram down below, so check him out, give him a follow if you aren't already. Super nice guy. Again, I really appreciate that he sent me these to check out and just kind of get some impressions on. He sent me the Benchmade Anthem, this ZT0470 or 470, whatever you want to call it, and also a Benchmade Contigo. And he sent them to me just to have a look at, to review, and they're knives I was curious about. So, except for the Contigo that he just threw in. So you'll see the review on that one soon as well. But this is the ZT0470, 470, 0470. I never know how people would prefer I say their names, but it's the 0470. Would it hurt Zero Tolerance to name their knives? Not necessarily, but they're going with this. It works for me. If you follow ZT, then for some people it's easier to keep track of the numbers. For others, it's harder. It's neither here nor there for me. I don't mind it. But let's talk about this one. This one's a Sinkovich design, and I like a lot of Sinkovich designs. I've had knives that are Sinkovich designs, both from Zero Tolerance, from I've had a Spyderco that was a Sinkovich design. I think he designed the Drunken. I think he did. Anyway, I've had his designs from a number of manufacturers, and I like, in general, his designs. His ZT's designs I'm not usually as crazy about, just because I don't typically like kind of long, slender ones like some of his are. But this one, the design speaks to me. I get it. I like it. I feel like it suits kind of my tastes. I really like the material selection on this one. I think it looks great, and these materials are also super like usable, and they're finished well. I think ZT sometimes kind of gets overlooked by a certain segment of the knife community, because most of their knives, and for a long time all of their knives, were just like overbuilt, thick, heavy, beastly, like tactical focused knives. This one is not that way at all. And so some people who are into the like original identity of Zero Tolerance were kind of upset by this knife, and a few others that kind of feel like a departure from ZT's normal. But I like that they've got some variety in their offerings these days, and this knife is done really, really well. I think if more people who aren't as into those super overbuilt knives held this from ZT, they might become a much bigger Zero Tolerance knives fan. So let's kind of break it down a little bit anatomically. Let me say right now, this is not going to be like a full review like I would typically do with one of my knives that is mine, because this knife is on loan. It came to me in brand new in box condition. It's going back to the owner in brand new in box condition. I haven't done any cutting with this. I'm not going to be doing any cutting with this. I have just played with the action. I have slipped it in and out of pocket. I haven't even carried it. I've brought it today in a protective case in its packaging, not its packaging, in a protective sleeve, if you will. So my point is, this knife is not getting used by me. So for that reason, I can't really give it a full review like I would another knife that I'll go and test and baton with and cut through a bunch of material with to get a feel for. This is a knife I have played with a lot, and I have inspected a lot, but keep that in mind as I do this review. If I end up buying one of these somewhere down the line, I'll do another review after some use. But yeah, that's all I need to say about that. So let's talk about this knife first, kind of anatomically. We've got a 20 CV blade, and it's, I guess you could almost make the argument, I don't think anyone would except for me right now, you could almost make the argument that that is barely a reverse tanto. Not really, kind of, but it's got just this tiny little angle there. I guess you'd call it a drop point. I don't know what you would call that tip, but I really like this blade profile. 20 CV is an awesome blade material. I got no problems with 20 CV being used. Really like it. You've got a nice flat section here, nice gradual belly all the way to the tip from there, and that is a very usable EDC knife shape. that I frankly quite like. It is, I would not call it thin behind the edge. I guess that's a kind of a moving target. Some people would consider like 20 thousandths behind the edge thin. Some people would consider like 5 thousandths behind the edge thin. Some people might consider that line to be anything below 30 thousandths behind the edge is thin. It depends on how you draw that line. I don't know. I haven't put any like calipers or micrometer, whatever you would use to measure thickness behind the edge on this knife. I just kind of feel with my fingers, and I feel like I've got a pretty decent feel for that. And you can get mad at me if you don't think I do, but this feels like a pretty average thickness behind the edge for a knife of this size and in this scope. I would say it feels about the same, maybe a hair thicker behind the edge than like a PM2, which is a very slicey, well-ground knife in my opinion. So I can say with pretty good confidence, if I was going to be owning this knife and using it for cutting, I think this blade would do excellent for EDC type tasks, going through cardboard, tape, paracord, whatever it is that you cut a fair bit of. I imagine for most people this would be good. It is a very nice sharp edge. The bevels are all even on it, and it's really well ground. I really like, let me kind of wipe it real quick because it's got my finger smudges on it, but the grind lines on here look great, especially because they kind of contrast with the flats on this knife, which the flats are, I guess you would call them stone washed, maybe bead blast. I don't know. It's like it's a little bit of a textured finish on the flats, and then the grinds, including the swedge, are this really nice satin where you can just see the grind lines coming through. I think it looks great. On this side, we've clearly just got ZT laser etched on there. And then on this side, we've got all the rest of the lettering, which reads 0470 Kai USA Sinkovich design. This one is serial number 5003. And then down there, we've got CPM 20 CV. So I don't feel like that's too much to have on a blade. Would I mind if they just put 20 CV on there? I think that would be enough. I don't need all of that other stuff per se, but it doesn't totally bother me either. Let's talk about the action for a second. This is obviously a flipper. There's no other method of deployment. This flipper tab is really well done. I don't know if I've talked about flipper tabs very often. I'm not crazy picky about flipper tabs, but I don't like it when flipper tabs have like super aggressive jimping to where they're like rough on the finger. I don't like it when you land on a spot that's uncomfortable. I don't like it when detents are too strong or too soft for flipping. This one is dialed really well. The detent feels great for that flipper action. It's jimped for traction, but it's not sharp, and I like that. I feel like I'm not gonna like slip off of here on accident very easily. It works really, really well. The lock bar, even if I've got pressure on it, this knife still flicks open very well. I don't have to be sensitive about where I'm putting my fingers on the lock side. It's a great action out of a flipper. I am assuming this knife runs on bearings. Yes, it does. We've got this, what I think is kind of a cool looking pivot. Pivot's functioning great. Yeah, the action is excellent on here. I really, really like the action. And one thing I also like about it, I should say, on closing, it's not drop shutty. It's not like it's a free falling guillotine. It's a pretty lightweight blade though, so I wouldn't necessarily expect it to be. But the detent, the way, I guess it's probably ramped, the way it's sucking it back in, it's not only like satisfying the way it just like slurps it in, that's what she said, but the sound it makes, it has this really like satisfying, like it's like a mix between a clunk and a click. I really, really like it. I dig it when knives have kind of cool acoustics. I think it adds to the experience of them. So I like that a lot. Next, let's talk about handle. So the handle materials are titanium. It's a titanium frame lock, so we got titanium on both sides. And then it is a marbled carbon fiber inlay with what appears to me to be a G10 backspacer. I'm 98% certain that's G10. I guess it could be like a polymer or a hardened plastic. I don't know. But it's a black backspacer that looks good, has a small lanyard attachment that doesn't bother me because it's not in the way, and it's kind of hidden in a nice way. Yeah, so let's start with the titanium. The titanium on here is finished really well. I like the coloring that they did on here, and I especially really like the milling that they've done on it. If you look at kind of the chamfers where this knife is machined, they've put these really nice lines in the titanium on all of these chamfers that give it just a little bit of texture, and it also, when you're looking at this knife in the light, just gives it this really cool depth, and it looks like it's taken time to make this, and I dig that about it. All of the angles seem very deliberate. All of the machining is really well done. Everything is even. Everything looks great. The inlay here, I think, just adds to it even further. It's a really good looking marbled carbon fiber inlay. The fact that this is coming on a knife from Zero Tolerance, essentially from Kershaw, and is done that well on a production knife like this, I really, really like that. Sometimes Zero Tolerance uses some materials that I'm not crazy about, a la ZT0640 with their like weird puke green carbon fiber that they put. That would get switched immediately if I got that knife. This, I like just the way it comes from them. I think it looks fantastic just like that. I really like marbled carbon fiber as a material. Yeah, I think it looks great. So the handle materials are all excellent. Let's talk ergos for a second. We have the slightest, and I mean slightest, jimping right here. That doesn't bother me one bit. If this jimping was aggressive here, I would want to grind it off. I don't like aggressive jimping on handles, but here it's just like a little bit of texture, and it feels really good in hand. We've got more jimping here on the spine. Again, this jimping's pretty well done. It's not sharp, it's not harsh. This jimping doesn't bother me at all. Would I mind if that wasn't jimped? No, it would be fine to me if that was smooth as well. I don't feel like it's giving me a real advantage to have jimping there, but it doesn't bother me either. So that jimping is fine. The only other jimping on here is on the back spacer. So the back spacer has a little bit of jimping here, and then on the very butt as well. That jimping is probably the harshest on the knife, but again, it's not overly done, and where that sits in my hand, I frankly don't even really feel it. I guess that's probably more designed for like a reverse grip. I guess in a tactical situation that might come in handy. The jimping here, right where my thumb goes, does actually feel kind of nice. I don't mind that one bit. I like it a lot. So this knife is really comfortable in a hammer grip. Sinkovich does a great job at designing ergos into knives, I think. All of his designs that I've held have felt really good in my hand. The way that you've got this kind of curve downward here just naturally takes the hand and runs with it. Saber grip, I think, is my favorite grip on this knife. It feels really good and really locked in a saber grip. I like that a lot. Reverse grip, very comfortable. The size of this knife feels just right for me. I really like the amount of blade for amount of handle I'm getting here. It feels, oh, I guess that's a side point from ergos, but the size of it for me works excellent. I don't have so much handle that I've got a bunch of wasted real estate, and it feels like the blade is just the perfect amount for how much handle we're getting here on a folding knife. Yeah, I guess in a draw cut, feels good to me. There's no like harsh angles in here or anything, so that feels really good. I guess reverse draw we'll try. That's probably the least favorable grip on here, but that's probably the least used grip from anybody on earth. Let's talk real quick as well about the lock bar. We do have a stainless steel insert on here, which is finished really well, looks great. The way that the lock bar is cut looks a little interesting to me, the way there's kind of this notch in here. Functionality wise, it works excellent. The lock bar actually runs right up to the pivot, which I think looks cool. Yeah, it's really well dialed. The way that they've done this kind of slight notch on the show scale, and then they've like scalloped in here to make this really great access point, it works really well. I wouldn't have any kind of fatigue if I was playing with this knife for hours at a time. And frankly, I have flipped this knife a lot, sitting on my couch, watching shows, just like playing with it. Disengaging that lock is very pleasant on here. It's done really well. Sometimes it's a shame when a knife has an awesome awesome action, and then disengaging the lock is like rough on your thumb and a bummer to do, because then the knife, even though it has a really fun to play with action, is not fun to play with, because in order to do the action again, you've got to disengage the lock and close it. So yeah, this one, it's really well done. I've owned quite a few ZTs over time. I've had the 562, which is basically the XM18 but ZT's version. I still have an 0350. I have an 0620, which is actually out right now, having a scale made for it. I've had the 609. I've had the 801. Let's think. I think I had, I don't know if it's called a 560. I don't know. I've had quite a few. This is one that when it came out, I frankly almost got, and a few people told me I should because they thought it was a great option for me based on them knowing my tastes. I think if I had gotten one, I would have loved it. I'd probably still have it. This is a great, great knife. I guess one thing I didn't talk about yet is the pocket clip. The pocket clip, if I bought this knife, I might get an aftermarket replacement clip for it, assuming that they make one that I would like as well. This pocket clip isn't bad, not at all. And in fact, the way it feels in hand, like the ergos with this pocket clip are excellent. But having slid this knife in and out of pocket once or twice, I tried it on jeans and on shorts just to see how it did. I wish it had just a little more clearance, a little bit more lip here, and I wouldn't mind if it was a deep carry clip. I feel like with this being such an EDC focused ZT and kind of like a gentlemanly designed one compared to all their other models, it would have been great to see them do a nice proper kind of loop over deep carry clip. And I'm sure they're capable of making that. It's just not something that I don't know if they do that on any of their models at the moment. But yeah, the clip is just fine. I think aesthetically it looks okay. It matches kind of the lines of the knife, and it doesn't bother me per se, but it's definitely not like a shining feature on this knife. It doesn't enhance my experience with it, other than that it does feel good in hand, so I'll give it that. But yeah, this is a really cool zero tolerance, and I think it's one of their a little bit polarizing models. Since this one, they've probably made a few more that are even more polarizing, like that little 22. What else have they made? They've made a slip joint. I don't know. They seem to be kind of experimenting with some other things at this point, which is fine with me. But I have seen a lot of the kind of like die-hard old school ZT guys who loved the first ZTs that were coming out, the built like a tank ZTs. This isn't a knife really for them. But in my opinion, kudos to ZT for beginning to make some other things that other people can like and enjoy, and not just serving one market. I think this knife, yeah, the more people that give it a try, the more people will probably like this, and this opens up some doors building this kind of knife for ZT. Last thing I'll say about it, I keep remembering things as I go along. This knife is really lightweight. It's lighter than I thought it was going to be before having it in hand. Obviously, it's not massive. It's not a really big knife. It's a titanium frame lock. There is some internal milling. In fact, when I did my first impressions, I don't think I could really see as well in here as I can now. But we've got some extensive internal milling on the lock side. I'd try to show you, but I don't think it'll show from this angle. But on the show side, it's internally milled as well, and there's like a pretty good channel milled out right underneath and kind of on the backside, along where we've also got this inlay, which is obviously lightweight, forged or marbled carbon fiber, does not weigh much. So the construction on this is really good. It's nice to see that ZT went that extra step and lightened this up quite a bit. On some of their models, they're not focused on being lightweight. So seeing that they took this and really kind of went all the way with it. They made it light, they made it small enough, they made the ergos nice, they picked the right blade steel in my opinion, they used the right handle materials. All of it seems to have come together really, really well in my opinion. So I quite like the 0470. Am I gonna run out and buy one of these right this second? Probably not. There's just a lot of other things on my radar at the moment. And I've got too many other knives that are shiny and new that I want to experience before I go ahead and buy one of these. But would I buy one of these? Absolutely. It's a really great knife, especially like if I think back, call it 2 years ago, when I was working an office job and my EDC knives had very different tasks in front of them on a daily basis than they do now. Then I would have absolutely adored this knife for what my lifestyle was then. And I still would have an absolute place for a knife just like this and would carry it and use it. And I don't think it would be a bad choice even for using outdoors. The construction and the material choice could work great in a place like this as a small outdoor carry. But I guess what I'm trying to say is this knife for a lifestyle other than being out here as much as I am, and kind of like the nature of knives that I'm finding exciting these days, this would have been better for me a while back. And maybe I'll get to a point again where I'll kind of resurge into knives more like this. And yeah, there will probably come a day where I'll own one of these for myself. And I think it's definitely a very good offering. It makes a lot of sense, and I'm glad that ZT makes it. So that's going to be that. This is the ZT 0470 470 0470. I don't know, however you want to say it. And this has been fun. So thanks again to YD Knives. Again, check him out. Super nice guy for lending this to me. And yeah, I'll see you guys soon.